Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about Gary Gygax and his legacy, and specifically, I want to talk about the idea that incredibly beautiful things can come from fundamentally broken people, and how Gary Gygax teaches us that. All right, so, I think I've been thinking more and more about the power of Dungeons and Dragons. Combat was a really important pillar, and what it really showed us is we could take something historical and put a massive amount of system complexity on simulation around it. And we spent 47 years doing that, right? Strixhaven has opened up high mechanical complexity for social interaction, right? Gary introduced all of the pillars, okay? He set combat, a social interaction, and exploration into the game in 1974, and Mike Mearls solidified it in 2014 and actually gave him, said these are the pillars of Dungeons and Dragons, just identifying what Gary had set into place, right? Gary knew a lot about historical combat, and he started the ball rolling on high mechanical complexity because he knew, in my humble opinion, that that's what humans could deal with at the beginning in 1974. Now in 2021, we started high mechanical complexity simulationism of actual social interaction. Gary was not capable of handling that specific pillar, and the reason why was Gary was absolutely horrific at social interaction. He brought in the Bloom's brothers, who funded Dungeons and Dragons. He cocked that relationship 6 ways to Sunday, right? He brought in Arneson as a sounding board, right? He destroyed that relationship, okay? He handpicked Lorraine Williams, brought her in and said, "You're the queen of TSR." Handpicked her, right? Within a year, he had a relationship so bad he quit under her leadership, right? Cocked that relationship 6 ways to Sunday. All that we've talked about previously. Okay, nothing new there, right? But I've been thinking about him. I'm always thinking about Gary Gygax. He got divorced. Like, this is the last straw on social interaction. If you can't make a relationship work with the person you publicly promised to be with forever, you are not good at social interaction, right? So Gary married Mary Jo Powell in 1958. He remained married to her for 25 years, okay? You know when he got divorced? Literally when he went to Hollywood, right? That ain't good. That does not bode well for Gary Gygax, right? Gary Gygax was a fundamentally broken person who was absolutely horrific at social interaction, right? He broke every major relationship he ever had, right? He then married Gail Carpenter 4 years after his divorce and remained married to her until 2008 when he died, right? I've been married for 30 years, okay? I'll tell you right now, nothing, that's the one thing that my relationship with God is higher than my marriage. But fortunately, everything that holds my relationship with God together aids in my marriage, right? But my marriage I have constructed my entire life where there's no plan B. I'm all in. I love my wife to death, and I love her, right? And there's nothing I won't do for her, right? Gary failed at that. He failed at loving the person he promised publicly to never stop loving, right? Gary Gygax was a fundamentally broken person, right? He failed at virtually every major business relationship that he had, and he failed at, I actually think there was I think his relationship with Lorraine Williams was constructed. It's a bigger topic. But he failed to love Mary Jo Powell. He broke his vow, right? And he knew the importance of vows because he was into history, right? He broke his vow to Mary Jo Powell, and the two of them divorced, right? And, Gary's my hero, right? So what do I do with this thing where, he was so bad at social interaction, right? But the most beautiful thing Gary ever built, right, outside of his family life, was, because he had kids, right? And of course, human beings they're the highest valued things. But the best thing he created outside of his familial ties was Dungeons and Dragons. It's beautiful, it's powerful, it's forever, right? It is, this human improvement engine, in my humble opinion, that is growing in importance and complexity and beauty and soundness and power every single day, right? But that's not all Gary showed us, right? I'm 51 years old, right? I feel like I've done a pretty good job of being an evangelical Christian. I think I've done a pretty darn good job of being a husband. It is like critically important to me. And I've done a pretty good job of being a father, right? But the reality is I have been a suck friend. I really struggle with social interaction. And I am not good at being friends with people. And I have a trail of lost relationships, of my intensity and my adamancy, just ruining friendships that I've had. And I feel a lot of shame and a lot of frustration that this part of my life has been as bad as it is, right? And there's just like this train wreck of bad friendships that ended badly, right? And sometimes I can get down on myself, but then I see Gary, right? I see his life, and I was like, this dude he was terrible at getting along with people. Like, literally the person he promised to love forever, he ended up breaking the relationship with her, right? He was, and his professional relationships were just god awful. Like, they were just this strewn mess of wreckage, right? And so I look at Gary and I'm like, wait a second, this guy was fundamentally broken human being, right? Just fractured in 6 different ways, right? When it came specifically to social interaction. And I was like, there's still hope for me, because I'm not a great friend, that doesn't mean I can't create something beautiful and make something important and do something of significance, right? And that is really powerfully important to me. And I just see, I'm so wonderfully inspired by Gary, not in what he created, but in his failures. Even as a flawed, fundamentally broken person who absolutely sucked at social interaction, right? He still powered through and made this beautiful, wonderful, awesome, amazing, growing, powerful, important, valuable thing, right? And it's a message to all of us, right? Like, even though there are bad aspects to us, it doesn't mean that we can't make things that last, and it doesn't mean that we can't make things that impact the entire earth and the history of all humanity to the most powerful human limits. And that's what Gary did. He radiated beauty even through his failures, and his failures are still an inspiration today. That's my opinion. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.